Sit back and throw one back with your pinky in the air and a middle finger to the world, and join me, the eclectic gentleman Stephen Watts, as we look back on this day in pro wrestling history. But before we do, put that drink down, like, share, and subscribe, and without further ado, let's get our wrestling history on. Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, children of all ages, it is June 7th, and we're going to start off as we always do on a positive note. That's right, these are your pro wrestling birthdays. 1924, the original Sheik, Ed Farhat. 1929, one of the greatest managers of all time, the Grand Wizard. 1943, superstar Billy Graham. 1950, the voice of the WWF during the 80s, Howard Finkel. And last but not least, 1965, Mrs. Foley's baby boy, Mick Foley. Of course, on the flip side of that coin, your pro wrestling deaths for June 7th. 2006, the former Earthquake, John Tenta. Alright, enough of the sad stuff. It's time to get to the meat and potatoes. That's right, these are your pro wrestling history highlights for June 7th. Jumping in the Wayback Machine and going all the way back to 1956, where we see Dizzy Davis and Sonny Myers defeat Art Nelson and Rip Rogers in Amarillo, Texas, for the NWA Southwest Tag Team titles. Grooving into the 60s, 1962, Dory Funk Sr. wins his 10th NWA North American Heavyweight title, defeating Fritz Von Erich. Sticking in 1962, Joe Lanza defeats Turo Sakura for the NWA Southern Junior Heavyweight title in Tennessee. Skipping ahead 4 years to 1966, Ed Carpenter defeats Hans Schmidt in Quebec City, Quebec to win the International Wrestling Association International Heavyweight title. Making 2 stops in 1969, first Jose Lothario defeats Johnny Valentine to win the WCCW Texas Heavyweight title in San Antonio, Texas, ending Valentine's 3rd reign. Our second stop in 1969 sees Ray Stevens defeat King Curtis Iaukea for the San Francisco version of the NWA United States Heavyweight title. Grabbing my bell bottoms and going to the 70s, 1972, Gorgeous George Jr. defeats Bob Kelly to win the NWA Gulf Coast Heavyweight title in Mobile, Alabama. Jumping 6 years to 1978, Paul Jones defeats Baron Von Raschke in Raleigh, North Carolina for the NWA Television title, beginning his 3rd reign and ending Von Raschke's 2nd. Our last stop in the 70s, 1979, Antonio Inoki pins Stan Hansen in the finals of the 2nd New Japan MSG League. Grabbing my boombox and making 2 stops in 1981, first Terry Taylor defeats Les Thornton for the NWA World Junior Heavyweight title in Roanoke, Virginia, ending Thornton's 2nd reign. Our second stop in 1981, Bob Sweetin defeats Buzz Taylor to win his 4th NWA Central States Heavyweight title. That next year in 1982, Sergeant Slaughter defeats Wahoo McDaniel to win the NWA United States Heavyweight title. Jumping across the pond in 1983, Marty Jones defeats Dave Finlay in Croydon, England for his 2nd World Mid-Heavyweight title. Our last stop in the 80s, 1987, Mike Rotunda defeats Dory Funk Jr. to win the held-up NWA Florida Heavyweight title in Orlando, Florida, beginning his 3rd reign. The title had been held up a week earlier in Daytona after a match between the two had an unclear winner. Grabbing my flannel and going to the decade of grunge, 1991, Tom Pritchard defeats Bill Dundee to win the WCWA Texas Heavyweight title in Dallas, Texas. Next stop 2 years later, 1993, Bobby Blaze defeats Tony Anthony for the vacant Smoky Mountain Wrestling television title in Cumberland, Kentucky. Just a year later in 1994, that same Smoky Mountain Wrestling television title changes hands once again when Tracy Smothers defeats the Kendo Samurai. And last but not least, 1997, ECW held their WrestlePalooza card at the ECW Arena in South Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. The most notable match on this card is Tommy Dreamer defeating Raven with a DDT into a road sign, ending the storyline that Dreamer could never beat Raven. Although there was an ECW house show 2 years earlier where Dreamer had won, it was quickly forgotten as the storyline hadn't really begun at that point. This would be the last match for Raven until 1999 as he was heading to WCW. After the match, the lights went out and Rob Van Dam appeared and attacked Dreamer. The lights went out a second time and Sabu appeared, joining in on the attack on Dreamer. Dreamer managed a double DDT on Sabu and Rob Van Dam when the lights went out a third time. But this time, Jerry the King Lawler appeared, and most of the ECW locker room came out to fight Lawler, RVD, and Sabu, but were all beaten back until Taz came out and cleared the ring. Those were your pro wrestling history highlights for June 7th. I'm the Eclectic Gentleman, Stephen Watts, and we'll see you tomorrow.